Hi there, you're listening to Unnatural Selection, the show about newsy type stuff and things. My name is George.
My name is Tom.
And my name is Adam.
And with our powers combined, we are Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. Back for another week.
Yep, back for another week.
Back for another week.
Last minute addition of Adam to this episode. You originally weren't going to be here for a thing which you've then decided not to be at for whatever reason. But I had all this Adam's not here gear.
Material. Prep.
You can't use it.
You can't use it. You'll have to slot that one in. I mean, you could just try it on anyway, and we'll see.
I could just pretend like you're not here for the whole episode.
I mean, that's what I do typically when he's here.
Typically.
I just try to ignore him.
Yeah, just be like, George, it's just us. Like, you know, just you and me, just us buds. So between you and I and not Adam, don't tell Adam this. But
between us accountability partners.
Yes, between us accountability partners, Adam is into some weird shit.
Stuff. I've been getting some interesting reports from his phone.
Should we explain the reference, or is that just a secret one for the last week's listeners?
I think that's one for the fans.
If you want to understand that, go to last week's episode and download it to your ear holes.
Just Google MAGA Mike Johnson and accountability partners. And first of all, I'm sorry. Second of all, I'm
you did this
still
to yourself.
sorry. You did this to yourself.
Yeah, you needed context to what we were talking about.
You're so hungry for content. You couldn't just let it go, man. You couldn't just let there be something that you didn't know what it was about.
No.
You just had to go. You did stick your nose in where it didn't belong, and now you know, and that's your fault. Knowledge is the opposite of power.
Knowledge is suffering.
Speaking of suffering,
there you go.
Speaking of suffering, the big story in Australia this week was, of course, that Optus, one of the largest telcos in the country.
Second largest, I believe.
Second largest
telecommunication company in Australia.
That is what telco stands for, Tom. Thank you very much. Love a good pronunciation. They just turned off everything for a day.
Yeah, almost I think just over a year to the dot that they had the big fucking everyone's data being stolen catastrophe last year. Like, you know, almost like bang on. I was like, am I having deja vu? I'm in Sydney. Optus is fucking something up. Like, this just seems like a repeat of last year.
It's almost like, there's some fate to it. So basically what that meant was in terms of their coverage, services, everything was down. So if you were an Optus customer, you were shit out of luck, as it were.
Yes, not just for mobile phone calls and SMSs, but mobile internet, but also home internet. It seemed like everything was out.
So that affected things like Melbourne's train network just stopped working for several hours on Monday. Wednesday morning.
Wednesday, yeah. So I was meant to be going into the office on that day. And because I work from home, sometimes I work from the office. And Wednesday was an office day. I get down to the train station and there's just a guy with a clipboard and he's just like, yeah, nah. I was like, what do you mean? And he goes, nah, it's not going to just go home. I was like, what is there? He goes, there'll be like buses probably at some point. I was like, do we have like a time frame? And he goes,
I can't call anyone because
everything's fucked. Hey, I was like, cool. Well, see you later. I guess I'll just turn around and go home, work from home. What would we do in eras past before working from home was like such an established thing? We just go, guess I'll just get in at work at 11:30 or whatever, like whenever the buses decide to take me to work. Like,
yeah, I mean, you basically, you either sat at a train station and then sat there for several hours while the trains cleared and when they eventually came, or you would just get a drive to work, catch a taxi to work, and then the roads would be fucked, the trams would be fucked, and everything is fucked. This also affected things like, so if you were on a Optus landline, you couldn't call 000. There were 000 calls that went to nowhere.
That seems safe and normal.
Safe, totally safe.
Totally, that doesn't feel like the sort of thing that should have like a backup system attached to it, like emergency SOS calls.
Well, if you're on a mobile, it would piggyback. So there's a system where you can piggyback if you don't have cell service, it will go to the next available network. So that's fine if you've got a mobile, but if you've got a landline, if you've bundled the whole thing in, and some people do this, then no deal.
Yeah, shoot out of luck. Which I thought that was pretty wild, because that's like, at least emergency calls you can still do. Like, my phone, I've got, my phone does Optus, so I saw, like, I can't get phone calls or text messages, but my home internet's a different provider, so I could still go to work. Convenient. Yeah. But yeah, like, I could still call 000 if I needed to, but, not to generalize too much, but old people couldn't. Yep. Who all only use landlines, and they're probably the people more likely to be calling 000 on any given day.
So if you're going to, the advice from Optus was, if you're going to experience an emergency, please do so as with a mobile phone when you're out and about. Yeah. Do not experience an emergency at home without a mobile phone.
Yes.
And it affected lots of other things. So obviously, people that would normally call for certain services.
The cafe owners. The cafe owners were out in force on the news. The ABC reporter needs somebody to talk to about the Optus outage. Fuck. And they to look around. They go, what's near me? Where do I? The cafe owners. Thank God for the cafe owners. So we've got someone to talk to camera. And the cafe owners goes, Braz, I've been trying to take coffee orders and the bloody FPOS is down. Can't do nothing without the FPOS machine nowadays. Nobody has cash. It's bloody ridiculous. So and then banking, times 17 different cafe owners all across Australia.
Across Melbourne.
Yeah.
Channel 9's favourite. It was bad. Now, you might ask, how would this happen? Is it a terrorist attack? Is it a cyber attack?
Yeah, no, cyber attack or something.
It was just Darren. He just tripped over the cord in the main server room.
There was the big on button, and someone pushed it. Now it's off. Nobody noticed.
And then no one realised. And then they were like, how do we turn it back on again? And no one knew.
Have you tried turning it off and on again? Do a hard reset, stick a pin in the telecommunications network, hold it for 5 seconds, wait for it to do a hard reset, then put your password in, two-factor authentication.
And it wasn't long enough.
Yeah.
So then they had to try it again.
But it really is like a very serious problem, because it's like, two-factor authentication codes couldn't go through. So like businesses couldn't trade because their FPOS machines, people couldn't log into their dashboards to do business. Like hundreds of millions of dollars have likely been lost as a result of lost trade. And I think the ACCC was telling people, like, keep your receipts to see, like, maybe you can make a claim or whatever. And then Optus's response is like, here's 200 gig of free data. She'll be right. And it's like, mate, that doesn't make up for potentially a business losing thousands of dollars in lost trade because they literally couldn't do business. Like, how about some free data? Thanks.
Yeah, but also, like, even for me, just as, like, I don't use it for business, just as me, whatever. It's like, oh, cool, a free 200 gig of data. I won't use that. That is worthless to me. Like, I don't need extra data. Like, I don't know, knock $200 off my bill, maybe $1 a gig that you were giving me for free. That'd be nicer. Like, at the very minimum. Like, Jesus, that's worthless to me. But as someone, just to shout out there, as someone who works in IT and does deployments to like production environments on a weekly basis, I can empathize with them in that it takes a while to roll that shit back. People think like, you don't have a redundancy. It's like the redundancies still take time. So like, that explains the length of it, kind of thing. It's not easy to roll back to an earlier version of the production environment.
They haven't clarified.
But we don't know that that's what it was.
Right? We don't know what the issue is. Yeah. All they've said is it wasn't a cyber attack.
Yeah.
No, they said it was a real like saying something while saying nothing at the same time kind of response of like a technical fault caused an outage or something like that. It's like, that doesn't mean anything.
They described it as a deep network problem, and the CEO said they were, quote, really, really sorry.
But as long as they qualified it twice. Two really.
No. Let me tell you, we are extremely sorry about how this. That's the sort of thing like a fifth grader would say about not turning in their book report in on time. It's just like, listen, I forgot to read Lord of the Flies. I'm really, really sorry. Like, it's not the response from like a grown up big boy CEO that's trying to like take accountability for an essential service that 10 million people countrywide rely on. To live.
I just don't understand how, like, is it literally to do with lines of code? Like, I would assume it's hardware related because
they said a deep network problem. A deep network problem. So who knows?
Which is basically the transmission of data.
Well,
So
it can be a mixture, right? Like I wouldn't pretend for a minute to fully understand sort of how the infrastructure of a telco kind of works in that way. But a software deployment going wrong can break hardware. Like if there's a big server that was to do with it, like if it's server infrastructure that is the critical point, and an update that they deployed out broke in the production environment, that can do it. Like that could have done it, or it could be someone like pull the plug on something they shouldn't have. Like usually it's not that simple, but it sounds to me like that. They were actioning something in their infrastructure, and it did not go to plan. And the worst case scenario happened, where it wasn't just like, oh no, things like people couldn't access their emails or something internally for a bit. Oh fuck,
it's
fucked it up. It was the business shut down. Like that.
How do you shut down the entire transmission of information? That's the thing that I can't.
It's a Black Mirror
what
episode.
governs that?
I guess it's whatever in their infrastructure that processes that information. Like, because I know probably it's not like every single tower will have gone down. Like, the actual cell towers have shut down or anything like that. It's probably more that like that coverage exists. Just how that data is exchanged over that connection. Like when it gets to the other end,
maybe to their
who knows? I could only speculate at that point. I'd imagine it's more like something went wrong, so that it's less that the network went out. I'd imagine it's less that the network went out because like the cell towers were broken, but more a part of the process to allow all this exchange of phone calls and text messages and all that sort of data is broken. So, because they could probably turn off my service, right? Like my phone could still be getting service from one of their towers, but they could just decide that I have no. It's like, if I didn't pay my bill, they could just decide that I can't exchange things. So probably that process was either implemented because there was a fault and they've we have to cut everyone off until this is fixed.
Okay.
Or the problem was that it cut everyone off and they needed to fix it.
That's an interesting theory, is if it was a deliberate, where actually there's some other issue, like a security issue or something, but so we're turning off the network to stop something else happening.
Well, or the issue just turned off the network, but the actual waves going through the air, I don't think invisible stuff was still there.
I don't think it was a hardware issue from what they're saying. Like, it seems to me like there was some sort of single point of failure in the system, and then there's been a cascading set of failures. It's and then the systems that you would then need, for example, if you're running a piece of software, a piece of cloud software, and that fails, then there are these things called cascading failures, which means all of those requests that come into the system get queued up, but then the next system down that deals with those items in the queue then gets overloaded, and then so you need to bring in more servers in order to handle the load, and people are making requests because things aren't coming up on their phone, so they're swiping again and again trying to refresh, and that you get 10 times as many requests. And I think it's something like that, where there's some sort of cascading set of failures in the system.
I feel like though it's just
but you should never have a single point of failure. That's the whole point of risk management systems, is to mitigate for exactly this kind of scenario, right? Where you have backup systems and redundancy. So if something fails, you don't have a single point of failure for the entire countrywide network, right?
The hilarious thing with Metro trains as well was that their primary system was Optus based, but also their backup system was Optus,
which is just crazy.
Optus-based. It's why would you do that?
Well, I guess that's them preparing for their hardware failure, right? It's like, if our primary system goes down, there's a backup system that we have that we can use. But of course, Optus will always be running, right? It's probably
single point of failure.
Which is a single point of failure, which is a very bad idea. I just think it's a fascinating look at the idea that one telecommunications company can, if one telecommunications company has an outage like this, yeah, as George alluded to before, the sheer dollar value that can have on all the businesses, then also like the risk to people like not being able to call emergencies and all that sort of stuff. I mean, from my perspective, because I think I noticed when I checked the news at like 8 a.m. or something was when I was like, I actually don't have service. That's weird. And I got service back, I think at about 2 p.m. So that's 6 hours? That in 6 hours, at least, that level of catastrophe has been hit. That only 6 hours of one, not even the largest, but one of the telecommunication companies go down can have such a catastrophic failure, which is probably why the federal government has announced a bit of an investigation into the Optus outage. And maybe, like, I know it's probably more them just wanting to look into it just to be like, don't you fuck up again. And also to see if there's any, like, if they can, like, force anyone's hand to kind of compensate those, like, the businesses affected and all that sort of stuff in the wake of this. Because I believe the communications minister, Michelle Rowland, is undertaking the review and said, "Hey, Optus, you should probably figure something out. Like you should figure a way to compensate people." But yeah, like maybe something would come out of this to be like, "Hey, we need to sort of rethink the mutual obligations of telecommunications companies so that in events of things like this, that businesses could piggyback off other networks to at least operate in those capacities and things like that." Because it's pretty bad that one telecommunication company goes down and it's been wall to wall every cafe owner in the country being like everyone who's coming. Well, and the knock on of, speaking of cascading failures, can you imagine like my office or whatever, like the guys in Melbourne probably aren't running on Optus's internet as far as I know because nothing went down, but Jesus Christ, they need their coffee when they're on their way in. And if every cafe in the area is not serving coffee, that's just fucked up that business's productivity for the day because we're all caffeine addicts.
I really think the more serious breach of the public trust was the lack of people being able to access caffeine. I mean, I don't carry cash really anymore. I've got an emergency $20 note and that's it. So, things aren't getting done if I'm not caffeinated,
It was definitely a failure on the apocalypse test or the invasion test. Like, next thing, it's like that line in Phantom Menace of Star Wars. He's like, well, what did they say? They've disabled our communications. He's like, that can only mean one thing, invasion. It's like, okay, you went from A to B real quick, but sure.
Real quick, whilst we went from, they've taken down our communications. You mean there's no coffee? Like, our first thought. Yeah, it shows kind of how privileged we are as a country, isn't it? That our first thought isn't the Russians are coming. It's, oh, fuck, I can't. What do you mean I can't get my double shot soy macchiato?
Meanwhile, the Chinese are like, come on, we're trying to invade. God, like, focus.
Yeah, not after my espresso.
Yeah, it's the phone lines are out, so therefore it must be Red Dawn. The Russians are coming.
It's the only reasonable
scenario. It's the only reasonable explanation. Motley Fool, incidentally, has Optus down as a buy. I don't know if that's related, but no, it does not constitute financial advice.
Or any advice.
The real question is, though, how do we pin the blame on Gladys? I don't recall Berejiklian. That's the real question because she works at Optus now. So
she yeeted out of New South Wales politics and into the Optus board. I'd totally forgotten about that.
Well, she's good in a crisis, guys. Don't worry about that. Ruby Princess, just ignore that. Well, that wasn't her fault, really. That was more probably the federal government, but whatever. So good.
Actually, wasn't there was a finding that it was the company that was at fault for that? There was something that came out recently about that, wasn't there?
Yeah, we covered it, and now we've promptly forgotten.
Yeah.
So,
well, I guess given it sat squarely in the kind of news, we're like, I think we all knew this, so we just didn't record it in our brains.
Found failings of the agriculture department likely contributed to the Ruby Princess outbreak. So federal government department and New South Wales Health.
But Gladys Berejiklian is the lady that saved Australia. So all good.
Yes, of course.
But speaking of the federal government, they're in a bit of a tight spot this week, if you believe the ABC and everyone else. But basically. This is around
which when I posted the article, I
Yeah.
specifically said I didn't like the way that it was framed in terms of like a sort of a political horse race kind of perspective. And then what you've gone and done is then just perpetuated that exact narrative that I took umbrage with on our podcast. So that's cool.
We live to piss you off.
Yeah, it seems that way. So there was a High Court ruling this week that was to do with migration, right? So essentially, since 2004, John Howard's coalition government, had a really anti-immigration stance. People might remember the Child Overboard scandal, where John Howard alleged that asylum seekers who were trying to reach Australia by boat had like threatened to drown their own kids or were drowning their own kids. I don't remember the detail of that, but like very like the Howard government very consciously making a campaign of stopping the boats.
Yeah, trying to like
demonizing.
Dehumanizing and otherizing asylum seekers. I believe in the Kids Overboard scandal specifically, it was like you widen out the photograph and the boat was on fire, if I remember correctly.
Well, yeah,
like they had images of like adults throwing their children into the water.
Yeah.
And they're like, look, they're drowning their kids. It's like, well, no, that boat was sinking.
Trying to save their kids. That makes more sense.
Getting them off the boat.
Yeah,
because it was going to explode.
John Howard, history's greatest monster. So the year is 2004. John Howard's coalition government has currently been in power for 8 years, and the High Court at this stage is hearing a case known as Al-Kateb v. Godwin. So a Kuwaiti-born man who hadn't inherited Kuwaiti citizenship at birth had arrived in Australia, and his case was being heard by the High Court. So he was denied a visa and detained in immigration detention. The government didn't have anywhere to send him, even though he was stateless. And as a result of not having a country to send him to and no desire to issue him a visa, the court decided in a 4-3 ruling that basically accepted that it was lawful for this man to face indefinite detention. Right?
So just prison forever for you.
Basically, the court ruled that if you don't want to give them a visa based on character grounds or whatever reason you want to not give someone a visa, but they're here and you can't send them anywhere else.
To send them. That's the key part.
That it's basically legal to detain that person indefinitely, which doesn't seem like that would be constitutional just on like a prima facie on the face reading of the facts. It doesn't seem like that's how international law should work. It's just like, oh, we've got a guy, nobody wants him. I guess we'll just put him in prison forever. Seems legit. Yep. that seems to accord with the Geneva Convention. Anyway, and that was basically the legal precedent for the next 2 decades, right? For the next 19 years, where a bunch of people were trying to attempt to migrate to or seek asylum here in Australia were detained sometimes for years at a time, and it was all predicated on this legal justification that the Australian government could more or less do what it wants with people who are here without a legal basis, right? That was until Wednesday, when the High Court shocked legal and government circles in announcing its decision immediately after hearing 2 days of oral arguments on a new case. So there was a short adjournment at 4:17 p.m. The justices returned at 4:33 p.m., right? Before anyone could even get their coffees and get back into the room.
Especially it was Wednesday, so all the cafes were down.
Exactly right. So there's a new Chief Justice, Stephen Gallagher, and he's only a few days into his new role as the head of the court. He spoke for 3 minutes, and he said that the court had found at least a majority of justices agreed that sections of the Migration Act were unconstitutional as a result of this most recent case. So essentially overturning 2 decades of legal precedent and more or less saying like the way we have conceived of the Foreign Migration Act as it currently stands is not constitutional, and the indefinite detention of people in Australia is not legal.
That's the thrust of it. The specifics are that it was about a case. The case was around a Rohingya man who had basically arrived in Australia as a as an immigrant, or I'm not sure if he was an asylum seeker.
He
whatever
was
else,
an
but
asylum
he
seeker.
was-
So he was a refugee
he-
from Myanmar, escaping from them during the ethnic cleansing.
He was found guilty of, I think, sex abuse.
It said a child sexual offense.
Child sexual offense. They locked him up for a while, and then as part of that as well, Peter Dutton, in his infinite wisdom, when he was immigration minister, cancelled his visa. So this man is now effectively stateless.
Yeah.
The problem being is he's served his time, and now it's like, what do we do with him? And so this is where the High Court case has come from.
Well, not just that, he was paroled in May of 2018. So he's just been like in detention. So his prison sentence is done. He's paroled.
Yeah,
he can't
they paroled him and then
can't go anywhere, can't go home because he's been found to be an asylum seeker, but also he doesn't have a visa, so he can't stay here. And so the solution for the last 5 years has just been rot in jail until this, which obviously, like, when you think about it, just like on the face of it, can't be legal. Like, of course, that can't be the way that this works. Right? It's just like, well, it's like the Australian government, is a pub at 3 a.m. going, well, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here.
Yeah.
It's like, but I literally have nowhere else to go. They're like, well, I guess you'll be staying in here forever. And then they lock the pub behind you.
And so, it doesn't stop, to be clear, it doesn't stop, this High Court decision, it doesn't stop the Australian government locking people up for extended periods of time or for whatever reason. But what it should start to, the implication is that anyone who is held in indefinite detention, based on the fact that they have no visa, they're probably going to have to start reviewing.
They're going to have some sort of resolution at some point. You just can't hold them indefinitely, right?
That being said, the coalition, who obviously wrote this piece of legislation in its latest form, I think it was the latest form of the Immigration Act was introduced by the coalition. They've said, well, we're happy to amend it to something that's a bit more legal, but the coalition's also saying, well, we can't, take a back step on this. We have to be very, robust to maintain our sort of border security and yada, yada, yada.
The High Court requires that you take a back step on this because the law, as it is currently written, is not constitutional.
Yeah, I find that's amazing. They're like, we have to pressure the current government to change what they're doing because we're the opposition, and the legislation we wrote's been said to be unconstitutional. But but also, like, our whole thing is that we fucking hate asylum seekers and have to stop the boats. So, shit. Like, they have to really do some mental gymnastics to get this to work.
There are backflips upon front flips and side pole vaulting happening, Tom. It is a fucking gold medal performance by the opposition.
A double pike with a high degree of difficulty. I just don't understand. Brett Worthington is the byline on this story. And the way that it's framed, like the straight reportage, right, of the story of like, here's the history of the, Migration Act, and here's the court case that happened in 2004. All that stuff is really good. But I don't know if it's maybe just the sub-editor had a look at this and gone, this is extremely boring, Brett. We need to make this much sexier. And the way we do that is by framing it in terms of like Anthony Albanese's caught in a vice grip between the Supreme Court and the coalition. How's he going to handle it? Like, and I just don't believe that that's actually the most salient level of analysis for this story, because like, shouldn't we just be like, yay, good that we don't have indefinite detention anymore as a legal thing in this country? Like, this is unabashedly a good thing in my mind. And yet the only level of analysis that we end up falling back to as the media, as a country, is like, but how's it going to affect the political horse race? Like, Labor's only got 2 seats, and, the Greens are going to hit them from the left and the coalition's going to hit them from the right. And what if Anthony Albanese's in a minority? It's like, we're not going to election for a minute. So like, all of that is completely irrelevant. Can we just focus on like the fact that we've been illegally detaining people in this country for 2 decades and there's never been a serious like moral conversation, let alone a legal conversation about how immensely fucked up that is, and we're only just now starting to reckon with it? Like, surely that should be the level of analysis, like a stain on our moral soul, on our, shouldn't that be what we're focusing on? They're like, but how does this affect the 2026 election? That's like,
I mean, I both agree and I don't, in the sense of like, yes, I think you're absolutely right that we should be talking about this as to what a moral stain on our character as a country indefinite detention is. But on the other side of it, I don't know how you guys feel, but I've been feeling like while, from the previous election, whilst, in Albo v ScoMo, Albo was the lesser of two evils, it has been very much they're still walking down their like center-right bullshit and not really leaning to the ways that we'd rather. So I kind of like that. It's like, oh, hey, and this ruling is meaning, hey, you're going to get hit from both sides again. Do you want to sound more like the guys you spent all time campaigning that you hate, or maybe listening to the Greens a little bit? Like, or the law. Like, hey, they've told you that this policy that you keep getting bashed over is bad.
Yeah, it's
Are you
not
actually
even
going
like...
to do something about it? Are you actually going to do something about it?
You're going to be a little bitch like the High Court says. You're going to be a man.
Yeah.
It's like, it's unconstitutional. We are legally required to change this law.
You
and do
change
something
this.
else. Like,
Yeah. So
it's they'll have to change the legislation, and also there are 92 other people who are in a similar position as this Rohingya man, who now may have legal basis based on precedent to obviously challenge their current circumstances. Now, the question is whether, I guess, the immediate question is the government going to get on the front foot and try and sort these cases out themselves and try and sort of, I guess, alleviate the situation, or are they going to wait for High Court challenge and other legal challenges to start just coming in, and they'll deal with it on an ad hoc basis? I don't know yet.
I think what's most likely they're going to have a little quiet amendment to that 2004 Migration Act, and hopefully the whole thing just goes quiet and disappears until the next election cycle.
I think the Migration Act's been updated since 2004. I think it's just more that was when the legal precedent was put down. So yeah, it's you're right. It may well be something they try and tidy up in the background. The thing is, the Labor government they effectively have the same policy on border security as the coalition. So they won't want to plaster all over the headlines. You can get visas in Australia real easy if you just come by boat.
Anthony Albanese says, "Getting while the getting's good. Come to Australia, folks."
And because that historically has shown that there is an increase of boats when that sort of happened.
They will find whatever solution allows them to legally wrangle, get around the High Court unconstitutionality whilst still maintaining the maximal position against asylum seekers, right? Like they want that's the theory of the case that they put forward at the last election, right? There was no daylight between them and the coalition on this matter, right? So they couldn't be attacked from the right. So they're going to do the same thing. They're just going to hope that it quietly goes away before the next election cycle. And like noting the fact that we have goldfish-like memories when it comes to the forever prisons that we hold people in, offshore and onshore. Like he's probably right. Like, that we will forget about this by the time the next election rolls around, unless someone makes a big deal out of it. So,
which is why I guess this analysis being like, hey, you're going to have to think about this leading up into the election, like reminding us about this. If they keep that up,
the next election is not for at least a year, right? So it's like looking at it through that, like if this was in the lead up to an election cycle, I could see maybe this might become a point of discussion, but I don't like the knee-jerk reaction from writers and sub-editors across this country to frame every kind of legal story that has any kind of legalese element to it, framing that in the terms of the political horse race. I just find that to be a really shallow level of analysis when we're talking, historical analysis, class analysis. Like there are different ways of looking at stories, and it seems like no matter what or when, we always just redound back to the political horse race analysis. And I just feel like that's the most shallow level of analysis, especially when we're nowhere near an election cycle, state or federal.
It doesn't talk about values and the actual moral or ethical quandaries. It becomes a points scoring thing.
How about the stain on our character? The fact that we have not ever collectively as a nation dealt with the moral scourge that this policy has left us with over the last 2 decades, and maybe some discussion about the fact that it not only is it not legal, but it actually was never legal. And which is what the court has found, is that it has been unconstitutional this entire time, and maybe some sort of reckoning with that, but that's asking too much of an ABC article that's trying to get clicks, I guess.
Because only you would click it.
I clicked it, and I shared it. So there you go.
Yeah.
And now we're talking about it.
Speaking of clicking and sharing, Advance Australia, the organisation that was behind the No campaign in recent months, turns out after some documents were lodged with, the corporate regulator, shows that Advance Australia has actually doubled the amount of money, that donations that they'd raised, from 2.5 million to over 5 million ahead of the Voice to Parliament referendum.
So they really kicked into gear as part of that campaign. So I guess
literally doubling down.
Yeah, so they also spent a bunch of money during the campaign. So they publicly have attested that they spent $3.4 million campaigning against the Indigenous Voice proposal. And there was a thing, I think we talked about it at the time, where Advance Australia and other organizations like it were saying, talking about how to vote, right? And there would be links online to, we want, here's how to vote no. Like, they're presenting the information as those that how to vote. Like, here's how you go through the process of responding to a referendum, but it would be routed through Advance Australia's website. So they go, here's a link about how to vote at the referendum. It goes through to Advance Australia. They go, give us your email, right? And then they send you through to the Australian Electoral Commission link, which says, here's how to vote. So they're not doing anything illegal, but what they are doing is like harvesting all of your information and putting all this information together with cookies and other elements that they've been tracking your kind of activity online with Facebook and other kinds of social media companies for, sort of connecting that information together to an identifier by collecting that information. So there's a lot of what really worries me about that is like they've spent a good 6 months building up this massive database now, which I would argue is basically just like a disinformation machine that they've created. And now they've got the data and they've connected it up with the unique identifiers of millions of Australians. And so now we can realistically expect that in the next election cycle, that disinformation machine is going to be deployed against everyday Australians at scale. Like what they've been doing is harvesting information during this campaign. And now that's going to be deployed at a much, much greater level next time around. It's frankly a little bit terrifying, to be honest. But.
It's definitely scaling up. Like the Yes campaign still outspent them by orders of magnitude, but I mean they got, I would argue, pretty good effect or pretty good value for money for what they actually did. So Advance Australia,
I didn't see shit about fuck from the Yes campaign side. I think I saw one John Farnham, You're the Voice, Try and Understand It television commercial, and that was it. And yet I was seeing no stuff everywhere, mainly from like people's angry uncle on, resharing some, New World Order conspiracy page on Facebook or whatever. But like the level of content that I was seeing from the no side outstripped the yes side 20-1. So it's interesting actually to hear you say that they outspent them. Because I don't know where the money went, but I didn't see any of it.
So in terms of the actual campaign, so Advance spent $330,500 across 272 ads on its main No campaign Facebook page, Fair Australia. That's according to Meta's ad library tool. And in the financial report, it claimed that the reach of its social media posts on Meta platforms had increased 62.3%. 62.3. That's an increase of 62.3% in the last financial year to 40, and that equates to 47.4 million people. Now, from 2020, Advance Australia has spent $880,000 across 1,370 Facebook ads. So obviously the 1,370 since August 2020, and then an additional only 272 during the last
272 ads.
Ads in terms of the campaign. So it's a small pie, but they managed to grow it by fucking 62.3% during that campaign. Now, in terms of the Yes campaign, They spent $2.3 million across 10,222 ads on Facebook.
So a good order of magnitude more.
So a good order of magnitude. And just think about this. So the algorithm in Facebook, so in terms of the ads, the money that's being spent, the amount of money going into Facebook from the government was $2.3 million. The amount of money going in to Facebook from Advance Australia was, what did I say, $313,500.
That was,
and then they had an increase from that small amount they had. They had an increase of 62.3%, reaching 47.4 million people. Yeah. Now, what does that tell you about the algorithm?
Well, yeah, because also to put the 47.4 million people in comparison as well, that's what, twice Australia's population?
Yeah,
something roughly. Like that. Yeah. Yep. So have a think about that in terms of like the net effect. Like obviously, and this is the way the social media algorithms work, is the more you share something, the more something is natively pushed through recommendations, likes, clicks, whatever, shares. That's going to have a much larger yield. It's an exponential thing once it starts going. But same thing happens in Twitter.
The algorithm is definitely a part of it, but we're also talking about targeting, okay, and how you target those cohorts and messages that would be particularly effective to those cohorts is based on market research, which they conducted. So reading from this Guardian article, which we'll tag in the show notes. So Fair Australia, which was fronted by the Shadow Indigenous Australians Minister Jacinta Price, the group countered the Yes Group's call for progress and unity. Instead, its key messaging centered around division after a focus group research suggested it would be popular, its executive director Matthew Sheehan told the Conservative Political Action Conference in August. So they've conducted, it's not just an accident of like, this is what I was saying during the campaign. It was like, it's not just like crazy Uncle Bob is sharing New World Order conspiracies on Facebook and then like everyone organically boosted. Like there is that happening. That is an element of it. But another element of it was that there are moneyed interests, Advance Australia, dumping money and researched cohorts, small hyper-targeted cohorts of people and messages that they know will appeal to them, right?
Yeah. So
they've
Crazy
done
Uncle
the research.
Bob is sharing all the stuff, but the fact that Crazy Uncle Bob saw it was no accident.
Exactly, because
Like,
they designed a message that specifically Crazy Uncle Bob would share, would hone in on his particular set of idiosyncrasies and weirdness.
But we've got to assume, though, that the Yes campaign did that to some extent.
But not to this extent.
Well.
But that's what I'm saying. Not to this extent.
They like tripled whatever that is. That's like a fucking.
They spent more money, but obviously they had much less reach, much less effectiveness. So I think they just kind of did a broad campaign. Like, we'll put some billboards up in Pike Place. What? No. What's the name of that famous shopping district in Sydney?
I don't know.
Pike Place.
Martin Place.
Martin Place? Yeah.
Martin Place, Pitt Street.
Yeah. So we'll put up some billboards in Martin Place. We'll throw something up at Fed Square and run a couple of Facebook ads. She'll be right. They were just going for like a broad campaign of like unity, how good is Yes. And what the No campaign did, even though they had a fraction of the amount of dollars spent on Facebook ads, is they delivered hype. They researched. They did the fuck out of they front loaded the difficulty by doing a lot of market research and focus groups, finding out the exact messages that would appeal to these exact type of people, and then targeted them with those Facebook messages. And of course, that's a much more effective strategy because you're speaking to people in a way that they want to be spoken to with the messages that will be affecting them based on what you understand about their personalities. Like it's the same thing with like Cambridge Analytica and the Trump election in 2016, like using hyper-targeted social media in order to generate what is essentially like, I would essentially call it manufactured consent, making it seem as though that there's a groundswell, astroturfing, a groundswell of these people with these really, just these are my views, right? This is just a natural expression of my sovereignty or whatever. And it looks that way. It looks organic from the outside, but in reality, the whole thing is manufactured. It's set up by moneyed interests to make it look organic. And that's, I don't know when we're going to start.
Well, they've led the horse to water, and then the horse has gone, oh yeah, I'll drink that.
Yeah.
Like
well, if you got a thirsty horse and you target only thirsty horses, getting them to drink is not that hard, right? That's the whole point.
That expression needs to be widened. It's not that you can't make it drink. It's just that, but you can really pick the horse that fucking froths.
Yeah, only pick thirsty horses, right? And I don't know when, but like we have to start savvying up to these social media moguls, the Facebooks and Twitter, and like I don't know at what point we're going to, because essentially it's just like a poisonous, algorithmically driven hallucination machine that we've just like unleashed on the Australian populace, and then bad actors come and utilize it in the exact way that it was intended, with market research and targeted ads, and then we go, oi, that's a bit fucked that they poison the Australian populace against themselves. Like, this is people misusing social media. It's like, no, this is people using social media exactly as it was intended. That's exactly the point of Facebook and, and Meta having all of these tools in the back end for you to hyper target lookalike cohorts of the exact people that you're wanting to target. Yeah, and maybe, generally it's used to sell you something banal like fucking shampoo or whatever. Because you like David Bowie, you must like palm olive shampoo because of some fucking algorithm that they... But this is social media being used exactly as intended, except when it happens to politics, we go, oh, that's not right, is it? And it's like, no, this is the whole point. This is what they've been building for the last 20 years, is this brain warping machine. And then we're surprised when people use it for nefarious purposes. It's like, well, what'd you expect?
So interestingly enough, Labor is trying to put forward, so the government is trying to put forward a bill that will combat disinformation.
Just in time, guys. Nicely done.
However,
right after the horse has not only bolted but shat itself.
Advance Australia is actually going to target that as their next big push, allegedly.
You reckon?
What next for Advance Australia? What next for Jacinta Price and these kind of people? The right wing darlings, as it were. And it looks like this may be the next thing potentially. So effectively,
the irony of that, trying to combat an anti-misinformation bill, and then the far right goes, you know what we need to do to combat the passing of that? Flood the zone with a lot of misinformation, because if we have to start telling the truth, our whole business model goes bye-bye. So
yeah, it's like, oh God, they're trying to outlaw murder. We better start killing people.
Yeah.
Quick.
So the bill would give the Australian Communications and Media Authority more powers over digital platforms when dealing with content that is false, misleading, or deceptive, and where the provision of that content on the service is reasonably likely to cause or contribute to serious harm. There is another article here that's linked to that. So if you want to read up on that, go to the article we'll post in the show notes, and then look for the link for the next Guardian story, which talks about it, which has a good explanation. But
if you really, like, for the people who think that there's some big, vast government conspiracy and the government's faking the moon landing or whatever, just remember the fact that this government decided to try and pass the misinformation bill after the referendum, in which they knew there would be a lot of misinformation. Like, just remember, like, when you think there's some, like, 12D chess government conspiracy that goes all the way to the top, and it's just the Illuminati pulling the strings, and it's the experts and the elites trying to make us do things in different ways. Just remember, like, the Labor government put its underwear on outside its pants in this instance. You know what I mean? Like, government isn't that good at pulling things off, clearly. Like, there's a very obvious example.
Unless, George, they wanted the referendum to happen so as there would be a big, clear example of like how bad misinformation can be. And
Cui bono! Who benefits?
Yeah.
Speaking of conspiracies, this one is going to light up over the next few days, I think. And what I'm talking about here is there's a story that I think it's the Washington Post and German news outlet Der Spiegel published a report today, I believe it was, or this morning, last night, that specifically named a Ukrainian Special Forces officer, Roman Chervinsky, who's a 48-year-old, currently serving in Ukraine Special Forces, as one of the main organizers or one of the main
Architects.
involved, architects, if you will, that blew up the Nord Stream pipeline earlier in what year was it? It was a couple of years ago now.
Last year.
December last year, so 2022. Obviously, for reference, the reason why this is significant, so the Nord Stream pipeline was a pipeline between Russia and Germany. They spent a lot of money on that to basically pump gas from Russia to Germany to help, power all their lights and the heaters. And just before the Ukrainian, or just as the Ukrainian war was kicking off, that pipeline, there's 4 pipelines, and I think 2 of them, something like that, were blown up. And everyone was like, like the Spider-Man meme.
The Spider-Man gif of like everyone pointing at everyone else, the Russians being like, the US did it. The US is like, we didn't do it. Bloody, you did it. You did it to yourself. And they go, that doesn't make any sense. Like everyone's just pointing at everyone else.
Over the last, I want to say, look, I mean, at the time, there was a lot of theories around it. And I guess the subcurrent on a lot of the mill bloggers forums, mill bloggers are being people that are talking about the Ukrainian conflict, that kind of thing, has been that it was the Ukrainians that did this.
That's what I was going to say. I kind of feel like we more or less knew this, or at least supposed it. It was like the people who have the most to benefit out of bombing a Russian pipeline of oil to Germany. Was it oil or gas? Gas. Bombing a Russian pipeline of gas to Germany, the people who have the most to gain out of that would be the Ukrainians, because it kind of forces the Germans to get on side with sanctions and all the other stuff that was going on at the time. Like I kind of felt as though we figured that at the time, but it is interesting to see it
Zelensky has denied it, since day one.
Okay. Okay, buddy.
But this I mean, basically the report talks about that there were obviously other people involved. This guy couldn't have done it by himself. So how far does it go? Does it go to all the way to the top? Was it authorized by Zelensky? Were there other countries involved? The conservative sort of Russian ecosphere of information is basically, the US would have helped them, because how else would they have got down there and done the diving and, all this kind of stuff. So, everyone else is denied involved. But it's pretty obvious now that was Ukraine. And those voices have become louder over the last few months, but this is probably the first widespread, reputable Western newspapers that I've seen that have actually named someone from Ukraine as being responsible, which means they've done their research. I don't think we could say that the Washington Post is necessarily, they're not a puff piece kind of organization when it comes to this sort of thing.
Yeah, unless it comes to the Iraq War.
Unless it comes to the Iraq War. There were 2 pipelines that were blown up in the bombing out of the 4. So, as to what happens now, I don't know. I guess, the right-wing ecosphere will now start talking about, well, see, it was the Ukrainians that probably blew up the dam. They bombed themselves. They did it to the thing. They'll probably, there'll be a lot of extrapolations and conspiracy theories that probably jump off this. But I guess, potentially maybe, there might be some sort of war crimey sort of stuff that maybe you might get thrown in there. And not that anyone died, but obviously there's the ecological aspect and, obviously the economic impact that it has to people.
Yeah,
so
it cut off a lot of services to Germany, didn't it?
Indeed. And it did cut off a revenue
ended
stream.
Up being as big of a deal because they had a less of a cold winter than they envisaged, so it ended up being not that big of a deal.
And they were getting gas from other countries as well, and there were still 2 pipelines running, but I'm pretty sure I don't know for certain, but my understanding was that the Russians were like, well, stuff you, we're shutting it down anyway, kind of thing. So
it was one of those moves that kind of forces the hand of right. That's what they were trying to do, right? They were trying to make if Germany's going to come down on one side or the other, well, we want to make sure that they have to pick a side. Essentially, that's why.
But what happens here though? Because Ukraine wants to be part of NATO. They want to be part of the European Union. If you want to do that, you've got to really probably front up to some of the the international and wide-ranging sort of criminal proceedings that could happen under those jurisdictions. So,
well, maybe that's why they're floating it. Is just kind of like, we're just getting out the skeletons out here in the open, just kind of socializing it, letting everyone know, here are some of the skeletons in the closet. You know,
Well,
just
the
FYI, would
you
love to
know.
be part of your little club. Like,
Does this one military officer go down as the fall guy for the whole operation?
well,
I'm
yeah,
sure
that's what I mean by
know.
floating a balloon. It's kind of like, is everyone fucking mad about this or like crazy mad about this? Because if they're really mad about it, okay, well, obviously we'll deny it. It was just one guy. But like, you know, if they're mad about it, but not like super mad about it, we go, all right, it was us. You got us. You got me.
And if this was The Night Agent or The Terminal List, if it was the TV show,
the conspiracy
to the top.
The conspiracy always goes all the way to the top, directly to the president. That's how it works.
And the president's actually like a child molester and a socialist weasel at the same time. It's all tight.
Cracking open baby heads and drinking the adrenochrome. I mean, that's classic.
And only one man can sort it. Only one man.
You gotta wonder
when they are 15.
You gotta wonder with these shows like The Night Agent and all these like The Terminal List, all these sort of like conspiracy theory kind of action shows. You gotta wonder like, how does anyone have time to just like do their job with all the conspiracy stuff going on? Like, it's just like, I feel like chief of staff to the president of the United States is a busy job. Like that is a job with lots of stuff to do. And it seems like a lot of people like making trips out to the woods and like, killing people. It's like,
bodies.
It feels like very time consuming. I just don't feel like the chief of staff really has that level of time to sink fully into a conspiracy, especially with all of the real terrible things that they're doing on a day-to-day basis. It just doesn't seem like you'd have the time.
But if you want to watch Chris Pratt go psycho, check out The Terminal List. It is fun.
It was fine.
It was okay.
It was a solid 6 out of 10. It was definitely a show. The combat was good.
It's part of a genre, I guess. So final.
Well,
do you want to do the? Yeah,
I've got a quick note from friend of the show, Jack, who decided to write in. So Jack is someone who knows us personally, so I won't give too much information away about Jack, but he's very kindly written us a note. After the referendum, he says, Dear George, I would like to thank you for your enthusiasm in your latest podcast about the disappointing referendum result. I must say that you brought up some interesting points about the Liberals had no good intentions in the debate and that Jacinta Price will undoubtedly disappear from the party. Yes, haven't heard from Jacinta Price in a couple of weeks. That's very interesting. And nonetheless, the episode and your words have encouraged me to return to political volunteering. There is much work to be done for our country. From Jack. So thank you, Jack, for writing into the show. Do appreciate that you had the incentive to want to return to political volunteering. Obviously, we think it's super important that people do that. Not us, obviously, we're very busy, but other people.
So much.
I've got a newborn, so pretty busy. But it's important that other people
do it.
Well, can someone else do it? No, in all seriousness, I think it's a good idea that people do that sort of stuff because, clearly people who are not well-intentioned and not bargaining in good faith and are using dodgy social media targeted means of changing people's opinions, like those people are out there. And so we need to have a countervailing force to come against that and populate the discourse with good information. Speaking of shit, a golden toilet was stolen from Winston Churchill's birthplace. Adam, why don't you tell us a little bit about the special throne?
Oh, special throne. Who loves a golden throne? I love a golden throne. So yeah, I mean, would you not want to sit on that, Tom? Look at that picture in the article. Look at it.
Gold's like a very soft metal.
I feel like it would be cold as well. Like, surely it's not the most comfortable toilet seat that you'd sit on either.
It'll warm up a little bit, you just give it a bit of time and the gold just sort of melts into your ass, it's delicious. Is that how that works? I don't know.
Absolutely not.
That's how physics works.
It's just sitting in a chair of butter, perhaps.
I was going to say, how hot is your butt? If it can melt gold.
I'm a very hot butt. So the toilet is valued or was valued at £4.8 million. So that's 9 million Australian for those listeners here. It was actually an artwork titled America and intended as pointed, and it was basically a pointed satire by an Italian conceptual artist, Maurizio Catalan.
And you could
Now-
make an appointment, a
Yeah.
3-minute appointment, which I would argue is a very tight timeline to go in and use the toilet for,
Stuff.
biological purposes.
It's a lot of
Correct.
pressure.
So
It
it's a
was-
lot of pressure to get your business done in 3. Like I could do a wee in 3 minutes. I cannot 100% guarantee that I'd get in and get out with a poo in 3 minutes. I feel like that's ambitious.
And I think the kind of pressure you would have to be putting on your bowel to achieve that is not good for you.
No.
No, you should not be straining.
No, you'd have to be like, there'd have to be a coffee cart in the line. Like make sure you are ready to go by the time you're in the toilet seat. So
sidebar, the lights at my workplace are our toilet are sensor activated, and it's only a 5-minute sensor. So like
I've had that where the lights gone out where I've been in there
while
pooing.
you're in there, yeah.
And I had a situation where the lights went out. I tried waving on the toilet to try and get the light sensor to go off. It wouldn't go on.
Go off, yeah.
So I managed to get my phone and clean myself up with the phone light.
Yeah.
Finish up, flush, close the door. I'm walking on my way out. As I'm leaving, someone else comes in, opens the door
Lights
into
come
a
on.
dark room and sees me walking directly towards them. And I think he freaked the fuck out, bro, because he thought it was an empty room. It was dark. He goes, "Why is this guy sitting there in the dark? Why is he coming at me?" I really think I freaked the poor guy
He's
out.
some kind of weird darkness pooer.
Just hanging out in a completely dark room, just completely still, waiting for my next victim to emerge.
I can only go when it's dark and I can't see. So
Like
the moral
to
of the
see
story
the
is
sin.
moral of the story is shit quickly, shit often. But yeah, so basically the toilet was installed at a Blenheim Palace, which again was Winston Churchill's, where he was born, and they had an exhibition there, which this artwork was a part of. Now, in 2019, so this is an old sort of story to some extent, in September 2019, it was stolen. And this toilet was fully plumbed in. Like, it wasn't just sitting there. Like, it was attached to the floor, plumbed in. You could do
people are pooing in it.
ones and twos. And they just ripped it out to the point where they'd caused a lot of damage to the plumbing of the castle, because basically water was just gushing everywhere afterwards. And to this day, they do not know where the toilet is. It's missing. But
It's a mystery.
it's a mystery. But they have somehow managed to charge how many people? Four men with the theft of the 18-karat gold toilet.
Believe it or not, it's pretty hard to move a solid gold toilet. Like, unless you're selling it to Donald Trump or something, I think you might have trouble. Like, surely you'd melt it down, I guess. I don't know what you would.
The logical solution.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, they don't know where the toilet is, but these 4 guys they've charged, have they checked, like, Devo's rumpus room? Like, the ensuite off there is pretty dope.
Bro, you should take a shit at Steve-O's house. I don't want to say anything, but just check it out. Trust me.
The Guggenheim actually was where it was installed prior to going to Blenheim Palace. So it was actually like a visiting exhibition.
A visiting toilet.
A visiting toilet, yeah. But
How often can you say you've shat in, like, a plumbed toilet that's been in 2 locations?
it's unique, isn't it?
Yeah,
7.
because I mean, obviously, porta potties go everywhere, but yeah, like one that's actually like in a wall. I'm assuming people don't remove toilets. Like, if a building's being knocked down but the toilets are fully functioning, I assume they don't take them out and then relocate them.
No,
maybe they do.
Maybe do. Maybe it's all about reusing and recycling. So
Heritage toilets.
See, I'm just sad, like, because the way this story is being like touted around has been, headline of this: 4 men charged over $9 million golden toilet heist at Winston Churchill's birthplace. And I'm just sad that the story here isn't that William Churchill had a solid gold toilet. Like, that was me thinking, like, what? William Churchill? Like, that's the most Trump thing I've ever heard. I said William, didn't I? Fuck. Winston Churchill. I was mixing him up with Shakespeare's birthplace. You know what? Funnily enough, Shakespeare also had a gold toilet. But no, Winston Churchill. Yeah, that he didn't have a solid gold toilet, because I feel like, you're misleading me with the headline there. It's just a gold toilet that happened to be at Churchill's birthplace.
Now I know what I said about
Churchill.
Now I know what I said about sub editors and writing their own headlines about the story before. In this case, great work, guys. Well done. Perfect work. Change nothing.
It's very clickbaity, and I clicked on it. With
No notes.
My hands.
I love it. Love your work.
But I mean, though, like it's not too clickbaity. Like, sure, I mean, you can interpret it sort of that way, but it contains literally what happened. Like, I feel they're not tricking you into, like, this isn't like one of those, 4 men were charged over stealing the weirdest thing, and it's like
you won't believe
cash. Oh, and it was like, that's all money. It was like, that wasn't the weirdest thing at what all. Fuck. Joke's on me then.
One weird trick that plumbers don't want you to know.
Make your toilets out of solid gold.
I feel like it'd be very easy to dent and scratch solid gold as well.
It's a soft metal.
Yeah, there's a reason they don't make them out of gold. They make them out of ceramic normally because it's cheaper
not only the expense, but also the quality of the
more
material.
durable. Yeah.
Because
especially like I've taken, every now and then.
Oh boy. Are we about to get a George
no,
is taking a shit story?
No,
these usually are epic.
I just sometimes I've eaten food that a gold toilet may not be able to withstand. I would just like a little bit more security to know that the toilet can handle what I'm throwing at it. Well, gold is, as you say, gold is a soft metal. Sometimes I shoot hard.
Would you like to know? So the satire, the artist has said that the satire of it is that whatever you eat, a $200 lunch or a $2 hot dog, the results are the same toilet-wise. So it's basically a satire on.
Yeah, no, we get it.
Excessive
it's
wealth.
a gold toilet. It's cold America. I actually like. Yeah, we get it. You didn't need to explain the satire of that. It makes complete sense.
The thing is with this article is the police haven't really said how they found these guys yet. So they're going to appear on the Oxford Magistrates Court on November 28. And guys, Unnatural Selection will be there to cover this story and bring you the latest updates. Live coverage. How the shitter was stolen.
I imagine it's something like Casino. When they rob where they rob it and they do the big heist and then they're like, no big purchases. And then the guy rolls up with a Cadillac and his wife's got a mink coat. And he's like, what did I say? No big purchases. He smacks him around. That's how they got found out. All of a sudden, someone rocks up with a, I don't know, gold urinal. I don't know. That doesn't make any sense.
Gold urinal.
I suppose you just sell it, right? You just melt it down and sell it. You can't move a gold toilet in toilet form.
Yeah. You would immediately want to change its form so no one would associate it as being the same.
Like surely gold would be the thing that would be the most able to be like melted down and then sold as just itself, right? Like you just sell it as gold.
Get this though, right? In 2019, the article about this, so when it was actually stolen, they valued the toilet at $1.8 million. And now it's like
price of gold.
4.8 million. So is that because gold's gone up in price? Is that what's happened?
That's exactly why. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Oh my God. It's worth more than now. It probably doesn't even exist anymore, surely.
In 30 years, they're going to be like, this $50 million toilet was finally recovered.
That's why they took it. They was like, we're gonna like literally and metaphorically sit on this until it's worth something.
Very good. On that note, we have been, we are, we always will be Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. Make sure you follow us on all the bullshit social medias that have, do, or ever will exist at Unnatural Show. That's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and mother flippin' TikTok. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads at George Tsipos.
You can follow me on Twitter at Tom D. Heath.
You can follow me down to the Oxford Magistrate Court. Well, I will be getting the truth, guys. I'll be finding out what happened and where the toilet currently is. Is it like finders keepers? Like if I find it, do I just get to keep the?
No, it's not like a Storage Wars. No, it's like it's an incredibly expensive toilet. So
yeah,
no, but I could say that like I just found it, just found it.
Mm-hmm.
No, for my money, it's at William Churchill's house.
Perfect.